I did mention this in another video I've uploaded today, but I want to do a standalone video about it. And here it is about this particular topic. And that is the Compubox statistics for the Gennady Golovkin Daniel Jacobs fight. Because having watched the fight once, I was left with the impression that Jacobs was the busier fighter in there. And then I had heard from several people that the Compubox numbers said that actually Golovkin was the busier guy and he threw and landed more, which is surprising to me because that's not what I remember seeing. And I did say in the other video that perhaps it was Golovkin's jab. Maybe that was kind of the thing that pushed his Compubox stats up higher than Jacobs, because I remember Jacobs being the busier guy. Anyway, as you can see on screen, these are the Compubox statistics. And indeed, it was Golovkin's jab that made the difference, because in terms of power punches, Jacobs actually threw a lot more power punches than Golovkin and landed more. It wasn't particularly accurate with his power shots, according to Compubox, but Daniel Jacobs, over the course of 12 rounds, threw 371 power punches and landed 144. Whereas Golovkin only threw 259 and landed a total of 126. So he was much more accurate with his power punches according to Compubox, but he threw and landed less than Jacobs did. Whereas you look at the jabs, Golovkin threw 356 jabs over 12 rounds, which is a lot of jabs, and he landed 105. So the connect ratio for his jabs was not particularly high. He was missing more than he was landing, by, more than a 3-to-1 ratio in terms of missing and landing. And Jacobs wasn't really landing many jabs at all in the fight. He only threw 170 and only landed 31 over the course of 12 rounds, which is surprising given the fact that he had the height and reach advantage and the speed advantage. But Golovkin's technique is obviously excellent, and he has a very, very good jab indeed. And when you look at the Compubox numbers, you have to imagine that if there wasn't any political influence from the judges, that in their view, what won Golovkin this fight was actually his jab, because that is what has pushed his Compubox punch total ahead of Daniel Jacobs. He was absolutely rinsing the jab. He was just going ham with the jab, throwing it constantly, according to Compubox. And I do remember him throwing it a lot in the fight. That's what swole up Daniel Jacobs' eyes. He was getting hit with those jabs in the face. But again, that's probably why I was left with the impression that Jacobs was the busier fighter, because he was the one throwing the vast majority of the power shots. Golovkin wasn't throwing anywhere near as many power shots. Again, just to reiterate, Jacobs threw 371 power punches as opposed to 259 for Golovkin. And he landed 144 as opposed to Golovkin's 126. So, yeah, that does kind of reflect the fight, really. Golovkin's jab was more effective, but Jacobs was more effective with the power shots. And that does kind of show you where the controversy comes in the fight. Because one guy is landing more power, throwing a lot more power punches than the other guy and landing more. Not a significant amount more, but landing more. He landed, 18 more power punches over the course of 12 rounds, which is not a massive amount. But he certainly threw a lot more. And again, these Compubox stats are a rough guide. They're not going to be exact. Those figures could be off in terms of the reality of the situation. You're better off actually watching the fight in HD if you can get it and counting the punches yourself. That'll be actually more accurate than Compubox. Because, you have the luxury of pausing and rewinding and all that kind of stuff to see what actually landed and didn't land. So it's a rough guide. But anyway, according to the rough guide, Jacobs threw and landed a lot more power, threw a lot more power punches, landed a few more power punches over the course of 12 rounds. But Golovkin threw and landed a hell of a lot more jabs than Daniel Jacobs, which I don't know. Did that make up enough for the power punch deficit? That's where the controversy is, I think, with the scoring in terms of how the judges have tried to justify what they've done. They've basically said, okay, Golovkin hasn't landed as many power punches or thrown as many, but he's landed a lot more jabs. So we're going to give it to him for that. And maybe also the fact that he was coming forward for the majority of the fight. But to me, Daniel Jacobs was never really running in the fight. This wasn't Erislandy Lara versus Canelo. Erislandy Lara versus Canelo, he was just running. This wasn't Khan in a lot of Khan's fights where he's just blatantly running. No, Daniel Jacobs was boxing. That wasn't running. You know, when a fighter runs, I say they run. But he wasn't running. He was boxing. He was moving around, but he was never like legging it around the ring, desperate to get away. No, he stood in the pocket with Golovkin many times in the fight and scrapped it out. And then he'd get on his bike and move, and there's nothing wrong with getting on your bike and moving. As long as it's not ridiculous. Like I said, like Lara against Canelo, where he was literally sprinting across the ring. I mean, that's running. And even Terence Crawford at points, even though he beat Victor Postal very well, at points he was kind of running in a Victor Postal fight. You know, the excessive movement. Jacobs against Golovkin wasn't like that. He was much more comfortable than Lara was against Canelo, for example, staying in range and letting shots go with Golovkin and then moving off, because that's one of Jacobs' advantages, was his foot speed and his reach advantage. So to maintain the reach advantage, he has to move to make sure that he keeps Golovkin at the end of his punches so Golovkin can't get into range. That's the sensible thing to do. You'd have to be an idiot if you're saying that Jacobs shouldn't be doing that. That's what he should be doing. So, I don't know. I guess that's where the judges will make their argument as to why they scored this fight for Golovkin. And maybe that's where you'll make your argument as well if you scored it for Golovkin. The fact that he threw way more jabs than Jacobs and landed a lot more jabs too. And you believe, I guess, that makes up for the power punch deficit. You know, so let me know what you think in the comment section below after looking at these statistics. Maybe you disagree with the statistics. Maybe you think they're not accurate. Maybe you think they are accurate. They're a fairly decent, if rough, reflection of what happened in the fight. And again, we don't score based on Compubox, but it does give you some kind of indication of the ebb and flow of a particular fight. So yeah, let me know what you feel. Drop it all in the comment section. It's happening. I'm out.